The Divine Comedy by Dante is one of the fundamental pillars of world literature. Today we want to put this masterpiece in the spotlight. Apart from creating an epoch-making book, the Italian poet showed the rest how to write a visceral story which would draw readers magnetically. The power of Dante's poetic prowess was so extraordinary that the Divine Comedy became a touchstone of Italian literary language. The influence that Dante had on Italian culture can be compared to that of Shakespeare, who upgraded English beyond recognition with his literary works. How did Dante come up with the idea of writing a poem about his divine journey? And was it love that made this work appear? Let's figure it out. Every book starts with its author. In the case of the Divine Comedy, the personality of the writer is especially important because he is the main character in the story. Dante Alighieri was an Italian poet, thinker, public figure, founder of the modern Italian literary language, and the author of the famous Divine Comedy. The adjective divina or divine was added by the poet Giovanni Boccaccio, one of the text's first researchers. Dante's book presents a quintessential character of medieval worldview, but at the same time introduces a new type of a hero, Renaissance man. And on top of that, the Divine Comedy is a glorious ode to Dante's love for Beatrice. Dante's life could be more representative of Italy of his day. He received excellent education and became one of the most active political figures in Florence, his homeland. But when his party lost the political struggle, he was forced to leave his native city and he never came back. The motif of wandering became central for the last 18 years of his life, the time he spent writing his Divine Comedy. He didn't hold back to voice his political views in the text. Throughout the plot, the readers come across multiple public figures of Dante's time. Despite the pronounced political agenda, the theme of love comes to the fore, inspired by the great love of Dante's. The object of Dante's love in Divine Comedy is Beatrice. Her prototype was a real person, Beatrice Portinari, who also lived in Florence. They only spoke on 2 occasions. The first time Dante saw her, he was 9 and she was 8 years old. He was struck by her beauty and hailed her a daughter of God, rather than a simple mortal. But he didn't dare to strike up a friendship. From then on I say that amor governed my soul, Dante wrote after that day. The next time they met and spoke came only 9 years later when Beatrice was already married. Afterwards, Dante caught a glimpse of her several times, but they never spoke again. At the age of 24, she died suddenly, but Dante held her as his guiding spirit for the rest of his life. In the Divine Comedy, Beatrice is the epitome of the divine. The author lifted her into the celestial rose, the central and the highest place in paradise. Though it is a deeply personal story, Dante wasn't carried away to forget he was creating a literary text. The poem marries an autobiographical confession and epic journey through the world. Dante found it possible to blend his personal story and fiction, mostly because of his self-perception. He believed himself to be the chosen one, the Messiah, and most importantly, a poet destined to comprehend the essence of this world. This audacity is what Dante has in common with other great masters of the Renaissance, Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Art is capable of exploring the world, and just as Leonardo's painting tapped into visual reality, Dante's text interrogated metaphysical realm, leading us through the whole universe. Learn more about works created in the Renaissance era with our video course, European Literature, from ancient epic to the Lord of the Rings. We'll examine a great deal of European literary masterworks under a magnifying glass. In his journey, Dante sought to explore the 3 spheres of being: personal drama, society, and nature. The narrator's voice is the voice of Dante himself. In the European literary tradition, it was unprecedented that an author gave such an articulate opinion about the world. Going through the circles of Inferno, Dante didn't hesitate to express his opinion about his encounters. His judgments are harsh. He says unabashedly that some sinners deserve a more excruciating punishment, while others belong to higher circles in the Inferno hierarchy. It's curious that Dante dares to doubt God's decision-making regarding the degree of punishment. Such boldness was unheard of in medieval literature, but Dante felt he had the right to do so. He considered himself eligible enough not only to describe hell, purgatory, and paradise, but decide where who belongs. The peak of Dante's daring is Beatrice's enthronement on the white rose of paradise, with angels hovering around her in impressively complicated circles. Dante's power of love overcomes everything. There is no rhyme or reason for vanity to be at the heart of the poem. Dante walks along his path to cleanse his soul, and what he really strives for is self-knowledge. He is humbly aware of his place in this world, even though he endowed himself with the power of freedom, unthinkable for a Christian writer. The Divine Comedy consists of 3 parts or a cantic that correspond with the 3 stages of Dante's journey: Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise. The poem's key number is 3. Each cantic comprises 33 songs, except for Hell. It consists of 34 songs. And this is how Dante shows the deviance and abnormality of this part of the world. On the other hand, the extra song ensures that the total number of songs is 100. The goal of the Divine Comedy is to show people the path to salvation, and Dante saw his purpose in transporting mankind from the state of misery to one of happiness. In the middle of the journey of our life, the Divine Comedy begins with the main character being lost in the woods in the middle of his lifetime. For Dante meant the age of 35. In the woods, beasts attack him: a lion, a she-wolf, and a leopard. The lion is a symbol of pride, the she-wolf represents avarice, and the leopard stands for carnality. As you can see, here comes the number 3 all over again. Dante took a wrong way, sins took over the Italian society, and the human soul got into the mire of wickedness. This 3-aspect approach pierces the entire text. Dante moves from the darkness of the night to the gradual awakening of purgatory and the bright shining of paradise. Who is going to lead the main character out of the woods of his life's delusions? Virgil, the personification of reason, but his only guide because it was Beatrice, the symbol of love, who initiated the salvation of Dante. However, many people tend to forget that Virgil was summoned not only by Beatrice, but also by Saint Lucia and Mary. As you can see, Dante's beloved symbolism of number 3 shows up once more. Seeing that 3 such ladies benedict are caring for thee in the court of heaven, and so much good my speech doth promise thee. Virgil becomes Dante's guide for a reason. This is a symbolic meeting of Christianity and antiquity. Dante demonstrates how the Renaissance rediscovers the ancient world, and Virgil becomes the symbol of the classical European culture. It's interesting that initially Dante wasn't eager to go anywhere. Virgil had to persuade Dante to follow him, and Dante was like, "Who am I to go down there?" And Virgil had to make it clear that there were several people who wanted this to happen. The gates to hell read, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." What does the hell look like? According to Dante, the magnitude of punishment depends on the severity of a sin. If the soul is irreparably corrupt, more terrible punishment is meted out. In the 9th circle of hell, Dante and Virgil encounter Lucifer. He might be held above all creatures, erst created noblest. According to the legend, Lucifer was the angel closest to God, and he was the one to lead the rebellion against the Savior. As a result, Lucifer became a fallen angel. By betraying God, he was degraded from being the most beautiful of creations to the most horrific one. It was him who committed the very first sin that led to all the other misfortunes of this world. Even his name Lucifer, or Lightbringer, speaks of his long-lost beauty. By the way, Lucifer's fall formed the mountain of purgatory, leaving him trapped in the center of the earth. After making their way through Inferno, Dante and Virgil reached the mountain of purgatory, consisting of 7 terraces. Each of them corresponds to the 7 deadly sins. Before Dante could enter the mountain, an angel drew on his forehead 7 letters P, and they signify sins. Dante has to wash these wounds to clean his soul and thus enter paradise. The 7 terraces of purgatory are arranged like this. Terraces 1, 2, and 3 accommodate for those who loved to harm others. Their sins are pride, envy, and wrath. Terrace 4 is for those guilty of sloth. Terraces 5, 6, and 7 are destined for souls penetrated with avarice, gluttony, and lust. When each terrace is behind, the angel raises one of the P's from Dante's forehead. And while Inferno was a place to observe, Purgatory made Dante a full-on participant of its unfolding drama. What is the purpose of Purgatory? First, it's the conversion of the soul from the sorrow and misery of sin and the ascension of the soul to God. Secondly, it's the atonement for sins. And thirdly, it's liberation of the souls from vice and imperfection. Purgatory encloses those who repented of their sins during their lifetime, but didn't atone for them. After Purgatory, Virgil takes Dante to Beatrice as this Roman poet cannot enter paradise. In this part of the poem, the semantic content of Dante's journey changes. The ethics of the soul, which determines its punishment in hell, is replaced by the aesthetics of the soul, which defines its place in paradise, depending on how much the soul perceives and reflects the beauty of divine light. It's the time for the third guide to come in. It's Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, 12th century Christian thinker whose contemplative mysticism Dante valued higher than Beatrice's divine wisdom. How does Dante regard paradise? It's the opportunity to love. That which dies not and that which can die are but each the beam of that idea which our sovereign sire engendereth loving. The last thing Dante sees in paradise is the celestial rose. Here Beatrice must leave him to take her place in the flower center. Bernard of Clairvaux becomes his final guide. Here vigor failed the towering fantasy, but yet the will rolled onward like a wheel in even motion by the love impelled that moves the sun in heaven and all the stars. Dante's journey is over. To create this majestic work, Dante put into it the inspiration of a poet, the wisdom of a philosopher, the knowledge of a scientist, and the intuition of a prophet. He told the world the story of his travels, showed the road to salvation and the power of love. To get a solid understanding of the greatest texts in the European tradition and see how they reflect not just their authors' points of view, but the whole epochs, see our course European Literature from Ancient Epic to The Lord of the Rings. Find the promo code in the description box to get a 10% discount. We hope you enjoyed our analysis, subscribe, and thank you for watching.